So what might keep you from growing? If you're taking this class, you've already thought that you want to grow, but you might still have some hesitations, and there may be some things that are keeping you back. And typically, some of the things that come up: energy, money, space, sunlight, just a lack of knowledge, all of those things. But we're going to help you in this class to get over, I think, almost all of them, except maybe the time issue, though we will try to share with you some ways to save time and find shortcuts and make the work easier. So one of the things that we think about, first of all, though, is climate. And you have to grow where you live. And depending on where you are in Idaho, you may have a very challenging climate. So number one, you have to find out how many frost-free days you have in your growing season. And that means from early spring until late fall, how many days do you have without frost on the ground? So you can find out when your average last spring frost date is and when your first fall freeze is. And that number on average will tell you your growing degree days. So where do you find this information? Great question. So one of the first places to look would be our University of Idaho Landscapes and Gardens webpage, where we split up Idaho's growing regions into 3 basic regions, and we have information about each region on that website. You can also contact your local University of Idaho Extension office, and they typically have data and numbers for you on your first and last frost dates. So when we're talking about cool weather, warm weather, when to plant, what grows when, we're talking about the seasonality of crops. And we split them up into 2 primary groups, the cool weather crops and the warm weather crops. So if we're looking at cool weather crops, we're looking at all these different things that can withstand a little bit of cold, maybe even a little bit of frost. So these are the things that can go in the garden first. And these include peas, potatoes, lettuce, cabbage, broccoli, and including some of the other brassicas like bok choy or kale, Swiss chard, onions, leeks, and some of the root crops like carrots, beets, and radishes can all be planted very early and then harvested in early summer. These are sometimes less heat tolerant than others, so if you wanted a double crop, you might plant again in late summer for a fall harvest. So what are the warm weather crops? Well, these are all the crops that originated in South America or Africa or other warm places, and they like it warm. They will not tolerate cold weather and will be the first to freeze. And these include all your peppers, tomatoes, squash, green beans, eggplants, many of your flowers, pumpkins, melons, tomatillos, corn, and cucumbers. So these we wait until after that first frost, the last frost date in spring to plant. And this is typically May through June in most areas of the state. Then we'll harvest in August through November, again, depending on how long your season grows. So a sample planting calendar, and this one is really targeted to the Treasure Valley area where we have a little bit longer growing season, but you can adapt this to wherever you are. So if we looked at our last frost in the spring occurring around May 9th and our first crop frost occurring around October 9th, here would be a sample calendar for planting. So before that last frost, we can put in those cool season crops, those potatoes, carrots, cabbages, onions. But we're going to want to wait until after that frost date to plant the warm season crops, your tomatoes, melons, beans, peppers, corn, and those. So one way to extend your season and to have more produce over a longer period of time is to do what we call succession planting. So this is planting the same crop a number of times. And for this example, we'll use green beans. So if you plant a row or a few plants of green beans every 2 weeks or so, then you will have a longer harvest season. And you can plant these up until, probably about 8 weeks before your last or your first frost in fall. So also looking at your fall garden, before that fall frost, you'll want to put in some of your cool season crops for a fall harvest. And again, these are some of those same crops that you may have put in early in the spring. And then sometimes after the first frost, as long as the ground is not frozen solid, you can still plant a fall crop of garlic or shallots. Those are pretty late season because they grow all winter and are harvested the following summer. So don't forget also about some of the perennial food crops and trees that will add to your edible landscape. So these can be planted in spring or fall, and they can be planted bare root or in containers. And this includes things like asparagus, rhubarb, horseradish, some of your woody herbs like oregano and thyme, berries and grapes, tree fruits and nuts. And we will be covering berries and tree fruits in another lecture later on. But just don't forget that those can also be planted spring or fall, or even early summer, as long as it's not too hot and you have access to water. So how do you know when it's time to plant in your area? Well, for most of you, it might be really soon. But the best thing that you can do is get to know a soil thermometer. This is how you take your soil's temperature, and this is a much better indicator of when it's time to plant. And this is because the soil temperature instead of the air temperature is generally a more reliable indicator of when to get growing. And you don't have to use a special soil thermometer. You can even use a kitchen meat thermometer, the kind that you would stick into a roast or a chicken while baking. Just stick it a couple inches into the soil and read the temperature. So just here's a quick chart on some of the temperatures that you might want to consider when you're planting. So for many crops, there is an optimal germination temperature, and typically that's anywhere from 65 to 85 degrees, depending on the crop. However, you can see from this chart that some crops, especially your cooler season ones, can go in the ground and actually germinate at colder temperatures. So if your soil is 50 or above, you can certainly get germination for all of those early cool season crops. And we'll make a chart like this available to you in the resources section of the class. So we've waited for spring, we've figured out when it's time to plant. Now when do we eat? This is when we have to exercise a little bit of patience. So after about a month of planting, so about 30 days, typically we can start harvesting radishes, baby lettuces, or other small greens. We have to wait about 2 months for things like beets and green onions. It can be 80 days for carrots, cabbages, your summer squash, and some of your corn. And sometimes we have to wait even 100 days after planting for some of those long season, warm season crops like tomatoes, pumpkins, cantaloupes, or watermelons. Now, when you buy a seed packet or a seedling that's already been started, typically this information is on the label about how many days to maturity. So if you live in a short season area, you want to pay particular attention and find the quickest maturing varieties that you can. So if we're looking at some of our fruit and perennials, a dwarf fruit tree can start producing in anywhere from 2 to 4 years versus a standard fruit and nut tree, which might take 8 to 10 years. So again, if you're looking to eat sooner than later, certainly consider those dwarf trees. Berries can be anywhere from 1 to 4 years, depending on the kind and the size of the plant. Grapes, 2 to 3 years. Herbs, often immediately, though you want to be careful not to harvest everything. Rhubarb, it's best to wait 1 year after planting for the best stalks. And asparagus is another one where you'll get a few spears after year 1, but really your full harvest doesn't start coming on until about year 3. And horseradish is grown and harvested each season. So thank you, and tune in next time.